hope that you were listening carefully to the words of the song. People are trying to find perfect peace and rest. And the song was telling where you can find freely. I just wanted to express my condolences, actually condolences in all of us to the Borbat family, specifically Zoltan, who is here today with us. 3 weeks ago, his sister was here staying with us for a few months, and I hugged her, and she left, and suddenly last Friday, she passed away. And please accept our condolences. Keep Zoltan in prayer, his parents, his sister, the family. There is going to be a memorial service in this place tonight here. If you're able to come to support and to be with the family, that would be really, really good. Also, I know that this is last Sabbath, last weekend with us for Edita and then Danyata. They are moving out of Chicago, so they already moved, and we are going to miss you, but anytime you come back to visit us, this is your home, you're welcome to be with us. Thank you for all the help that you've been doing to all of us, and your wife is not here, Edith is not here, she's probably still helping. I'm also glad that their daughter Irina and Claudio are also with us. I saw them, met them. They're visiting here for Romania. Also, anytime you come here, you're welcome here. So now it is my great privilege, and I said we are really privileged to have Dr. Eddy Ramirez with us. Actually, I was so glad that he was here in Chicago. He was attending the meetings with the Society of Biological Psychiatry, and that's why we were able, and we are privileged that you were able to be with us today. Dr. Eddy Ramirez is a medical doctor, research scientist, published author, and international speaker. He do have 27 years of experience working in the lifestyle centers worldwide. He has more than 95 studies in the scientific literature documenting the effect of lifestyle changes on health. He's the co-author of the textbook of the lifestyle medicine, and the book is called Rethink Food, together with Neil Bernard, Michael Greger, Hans Diel, Joel Fuhrman, and other lifestyle medicine leaders that you know them, well-known names. Currently, he's the director of the research for the Wimmer Institute and the Nedley Depression Program in California. He's extremely busy, and we are privileged, and I can use the term that we use. We are really blessed that he's today with us. Unfortunately, this morning we would not have opportunity to ask him questions. You can ask him during the lunch, but in afternoon it's going to be a time that you can ask questions. He traveled all around the world. I know that tonight he have flight for China, where he is going to be there, and then after that going to Finland and many other places. We are so blessed that you're with us, and without any further, we are going to give you the word.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here this morning. Things have been busy just this week. We were presenting research here in Chicago, also in Boston and in Miami. By the way, Miami is very nice weather. Eh? I just got there 2 days ago. And things have been busy. Last summer, I had so many invitations that I put them all together. And this is how the schedule ended up, just for the summer. And what I did, I took my family with me. And we were able to see all kinds of cultures and see all kinds of needs and experience all this as a family. But while we were gone, because it was a couple of months that we were gone, where we live is up in the Sierra Mountains, close to Lake Tahoe. A bear broke a hole and went inside our place to help themselves to some good, healthy foods that were there. And actually, my neighbor, after a few days, realized that, and she called the trapper. They said that once they break in a house, they become a menace, because then they think house food, and they start doing that all over the place. So they got the bear, and a second one came in. So it was actually 2 bears that actually passed through there last summer. Today I have a very important topic to talk about, and that is how the brain changes depending on the environment that we have around us. And the brain is a fascinating organ. We don't even know everything about the brain. Every day, there's new discoveries and research that are discovering the intricacies of this tremendous organ. But something that we have learned is that the brain is plastic. The brain changes. Every day, your brain is changing. For example, the first time a little baby tries to throw a little ball forward, what happens? It's probably going to fall behind him, isn't it? It's not going to be able to throw it forward. Now, if you grab a ball, I am sure that you can throw that ball pretty good. You may not be a baseball pitcher, but at least you can send that ball forward. And the reason why you can do that as a second nature, you don't even have to have your eyes open to do that, is because of neuroplasticity. See, the behaviors that we repeat over and over in our lives become a circuit in our brain. Just think like a grass field. Imagine that this is a big grass field, and you are walking on the same spot over and over. What's going to happen? You're going to create a path there. Now, next time you are around the field, where would you rather walk, in the field or in the path? In the path. In the same way, our behaviors, as we repeat them, they start creating pathways in our brain. And naturally, our thoughts and our actions go in those pathways. Now, this is good news, bad news. Good news is because good behaviors start to create those pathways, and we naturally do those good behaviors. But unfortunately, things like addictions can also create pathways, and that's why the struggle and so forth, as the pathway tries to send it one way and the wheel is trying the other way and so forth. But there is good news. The field that has that pathway, what would happen if we stop walking in that field? What would happen? The grass will start to grow up again, and that path will disappear. In the same way is with our brain. It is possible to make changes. So that's why anytime that we try to learn a new skill, the brain has the capacity to change. New pathways can be formed, and we can learn complex skills such as playing guitar, learning a new language, and so forth. So those pathways are formed when the cells that help us with our thinking process, called the neurons, connect to one another, and those connections form those pathways. Now, do you think that me as a doctor, I can change those connections? We need somebody more smarter than the doctor, isn't it? to do those types of changes. And we'll be talking a little bit about that. So let me show you some fascinating discoveries regarding neuroplasticity. And the audio there in the back, make sure it's ready for here. Let us see a little clip of what neuroplasticity discoveries are coming about.
In 1960, a poet called Pedro Baquirita had a massive paralyzing stroke. At the time, it was widely believed that once brain tissue is dead, there is no real scope for recovery. The family were told there was nothing more that could be done. Pedro's elder son, George, decided to ignore the doctor's advice. He took his father home and began a series of exercises to see how far he could push his recovery. Pedro couldn't talk or walk, so George made him crawl. The neighbors were absolutely horrified at the idea that the son was making this elderly man crawl like a dog. But he started to recover. And then George made him do tasks all around the house, like washing up. And when he broke the plates, he simply replaced them with metal ones. He kept at it for 3 long years, by the end of which Pedro had made an almost miraculous recovery. He went back to work, he got remarried, and when he eventually died, it was not from a stroke, but from a heart attack, following a climb up a mountain. By that time, Pedro's younger son, Paul, was a neurologist. Because his father had made such a good recovery, he naturally assumed the stroke must have affected a small area of his brain. Paul took the unusual decision to go to his father's autopsy. What he saw was a complete surprise. Paul was absolutely stunned. There were huge areas of damage in his father's brain. 97% of the nerves connecting the cortex to the spinal cord had been destroyed. So how had Pedro managed to learn to walk again? Paul decided that somehow his father's brain must have learnt to reorganize itself, replacing the work of the dead tissue with other sections of living brain. Pedro's example showed that with the right support, stroke victims can sometimes make amazing recoveries. It helped transform how stroke victims are treated. Paul decided to dedicate his life to trying to understand what had happened to his father's brain. It's a concept we now call neuroplasticity. The idea is that your brain can, given the right stimulation, reconfigure itself, even in late adulthood.
Fascinating, isn't it? How somebody with 97% of the connections from the cortex to the motor parts are damaged, and then the rest of the brain that is not damaged learn to do the functions of that part that died. Why is that possible? The answer starts with an N. What is that answer? Neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change. And I could tell you actually many stories of how I have actually witnessed this with my own eyes. Now that's not the only thing. So that Pedro Baquirita continued to do his research to help people with different problems. Let me show you another thing.
Roger Boehm has been totally blind for 30 years, but before that, as a young teenager, he enjoyed playing cards.
I think that was an 8.
It's fantastic.
Roger is testing a device based on a concept which many have found hard to believe, that it's possible to see using the tongue. Vision through the tongue, hearing through the eyes, using one sense to substitute for another. These concepts were the brainchildren of the late Mexican-born neuroscientist Paul Baquirita. Many considered Baquirita's brain theories heresy, yet over the course of 30 years he and his followers managed to build devices based on his ideas. In this 1976 documentary, Baquirita explained his theory.
The brain is able to use information coming from the skin as if it were coming from the eyes.
Baquirita was bucking the long-held assumption that after early childhood the brain was fixed, that it couldn't change. He argued that the brain was actually plastic, that it could undergo major reorganization throughout our lives. In this 2003 film, he explained,
We don't see with the eyes, for example. We don't hear with the ears. All of that goes on in the brain. Remember, if I'm looking at you, the image of you doesn't get beyond my retina, just the back of my eye. From there to the brain, to the rest of the brain, it's pulses along nerves. Well, those pulses aren't any different than the pulses from the big toe. It's the way the information they carry is in the frequency and the pattern of pulses. And so if you can train the brain to extract that kind of information, then you don't need the eye to see. You can have an artificial eye.
If
The sense of touch has been really neglected, certainly in technological development. Almost everything that's ever been developed to connect something to the brain is via the eyes and the ears.
his first device substituted the sense of sight for the sense of touch on the subject's back. Made from an old dentist's chair, a camera became the eyes, and the light pulses were then routed to blunted needles that delivered the pattern of the object onto the back.
It's a blind person.
It's a telephone, and the receiver is to the right.
It's like when you were kids and your brother or sister would draw something on your back, and you'd be, guessing what they're drawing. It's the same kind of thing. This is electronically drawing it on my tongue. When I trace it with my tongue, I first determine at the top to see if it's rounded or it's pointed. And when I see that point at the top or more pointed in the tail, then I go, no, it's a spade.
Now let me show you what they have done. These people are blind. And please notice the thing that they have in their mouths, which is giving them the image. Isn't that fantastic? The ability of the brain to change. And that only works for things related to the eyes, also for other internal organs of the brain, such as the balance system.
What if we could present balance information?
Cheryl Schiltz also lost her sense of balance. An antibiotic had destroyed the filaments in her inner ears, which transform sound into nerve pulses. This wrecked her vestibular system, which controls balance.
I said, you mean there's nothing that can be done? What do you mean permanent? There's got to be like medicine or a surgery or something. I can't live like this for the rest of my life. Are you crazy?
Cheryl's life was so impaired that the thought that she would ever again work a regular job, much less ride a bike, seemed impossible. Tyler and Kazmarek built the balance device just like the vision device, but with one difference. Instead of a camera for sight, they used an accelerometer, a full-motion tilt sensor in a helmet to transmit head and body position to the tongue.
I was sitting in my backyard and I received a call from Dr. Baccarita. And he told me about the study that they were doing with sensory substitution. I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to put this thing on my tongue and it's going to make me feel imbalanced. Oh, for sure. And I put the device on my tongue and asked to navigate a kind of like a video game thing on a computer.
Now the square in the middle represents the position of the head. It's in the neutral position. And then if we tip it forward, the sensation moves to the tip of the tongue.
So I will feel a signal moving forward or back or side to side, and what that is telling me, okay, I'm too far forward, I have to come back and put that signal back into the middle of my tongue. And that's where I know that that's where I am in balance, and I'm indeed standing straight up.
We saw that Cheryl can use it immediately and very effectively. And as a matter of fact, so effectively, so the next logical question was, let's remove it and see how long she can stay without it.
Her feeling of stability, what they called the retention or residual effect, lasted in direct proportion to how long she used the device.
God, it's so wonderful. From there on, we started just built on that, and to eventually getting to doing a 20-minute trial, and that's where we recognized that there's a residual. And it was like for an hour, I was normal, and it was just phenomenal.
We realized you don't have to wear it all the time. This could be something you use twice or 3 times a day for 20 minutes.
And what happened was the residual grew stronger and stronger and longer to the point where I really didn't even need, I could skip days. And now it's like I very rarely use it. It rewired my brain. There's no doubt about it.
Cheryl's balance system wasn't repaired. Her brain had actually developed a new one.
Fantastic, isn't it? The ability of the brain to change. So that neuroplasticity, we use that for many things. For example, when you learn your first language, when you were a little baby, as you're hearing the words and the tones and all these things that are composing the language, there had to be some neuroplasticity in your brain for you to start creating those pathways that today you talk and everything and don't even realize that it's just a series of highways that you have in your head. But also as you're maturing and learning what things are correct, what things are not correct, as you repeat those behaviors, pathways form with that. And any type of skill that you learn, from playing an instrument to driving a car to using a certain machine, all those things require that neuroplasticity. But also, you have brain change with things, for example, like religious conversion. And you have heard the stories, isn't it? Somebody that has an issue with alcohol cannot overcome that alcohol, and suddenly something happened to him, spiritually speaking, and he's able to overcome that habit. What happened to him? Neuroplasticity. In fact, if you have children, you have major neuroplasticity in your home. Yes or no? You know, they disturb completely the program, isn't it? Now you have to wake up at 2 in the morning and change diaper, and it becomes complex. But not only that, when you fell in love, do you remember? Okay. Suddenly now it's not only me, but another person. And my thinking and my actions started to change based on that. Neuroplasticity. So any type of learning will create that neuroplasticity, and those connections are constantly being created and disappearing. That's why, by the way, if you are retired, you need to find yourself to get yourself in trouble. It's not just good to be sitting down and not doing anything, because all those skills, if you're not practicing them, what's going to happen to them? Like the pathway that we talked about, they start to disappear, and that's actually not good for your mental health. So there are damage that sometimes we create by behaviors that we do. For example, this is a special scan. It's called the SPEC scan. This is a normal brain. If you notice, things are uniform. There are no holes and so forth. What this scan is measuring the health of the neurons. It is not an anatomical scan, but rather a functional scan. Notice what happens if you use things like marijuana. Tremendous damage that has happened to the nervous cells, especially the frontal lobe. Again, if you were to open this skull and see the brain, you don't see holes with your eyes. But the nerves that are in those areas, those nerve cells are starting to get damaged. Look at this one. Be careful with that CBD oil. Contrary to popular belief that they promote it as the cure-all of everything, it does have some negative side effects. 25% of it actually still has some active marijuana effect. It can affect immunity, liver, and many other organs. This is from the FDA, a nice review of the literature. This is alcohol. Tremendous damage that alcohol has created from 17 years of using it just on the weekends. And I've been involved in some research, not directly with neuroplasticity, but indirectly. Like this one, how you're able to overcome things like benzodiazepine usage. You know, these medications for anxiety, like Xanax and so forth. Persons become addicted to this type of medications, and it's a struggle to overcome. Here we're showing how those people that were using them, you can see in the blue, the nice big amount of usage, and by the end of 8 weeks, you see it in yellow, how many of them were continuing to use it. What happened to their brain? The answer starts with an N. What is it? Neuroplasticity. This other one, I was sharing it at the American Heart Association meeting. This is going to come in a journal from them in a couple of weeks. This one in Boston, I was there on Tuesday. Very interesting study. People that listen to this type of MTV type of music, if you check the amount of smoking, they have double the risk of smoking compared to somebody that does not watch those things. And it could be copy behavior, as they watch people smoking and it looks so cool when they do it, I start copying that behavior. And also the second effect has to do with frontal lobe suppression that this type of music causes, which makes you vulnerable to addictions. And this other one that I was presenting also in the same meeting, how people that use narcotics, these opioids and this type of medication, Oxycontin and so forth, people that use benzos like Xanax and so forth, this is well established that that has negative effect on the mental health. You're more higher risk of depression and anxiety. But notice the third finding. Marijuana has actually almost the same effect respect to mental health as these other two substances. This other one, I was actually presenting this one yesterday. This is a big sample, more than almost 6,000 people in this study, and half of them refer to the fact that there was an alcoholic in their home when they were growing up. And what we were finding here with this data is that those people that grew up with an alcoholic in their home, unfortunately, have a higher risk of depression from that experience, okay? Now, there's good news. By the end of lifestyle interventions, by the end of 8 weeks, those depression levels actually decrease dramatically. And this other one, how if you use those benzodiazepines, actually your depression and anxiety may actually worsen as a result of using those substances. Or these other ones, how not only young people are vulnerable, but also geriatric population, seniors, also can have negative effects from using those benzodiazepines. And how it's possible to start making changes and decreasing them quite quickly. Like this one, in a matter of 10 days, with the right lifestyle changes, you can overcome those benzodiazepines. One of the things that we use, and this a separate study, is lavender oil. Lavender oil has anti-anxiolytic effects without the addictive potential of the benzodiazepines like Xanax. And this other one, how doing things that are against your conscience is not good for your mental health. Therefore, the light that you have, you should live according to that light. And this other one, a very interesting one, how bisexuals and homosexuals, or people questioning their sexuality, unfortunately tend to have severe cases of depression, and their depression tends to be more severe compared to heterosexuals. And this other one, this is one of our guests from our New Start residential lifestyle program in California. This one came out in a journal from the American Heart Association. Classic patient that comes to us, diabetic, with nerve damage to his legs, with high blood pressure, and with a big problem with his weight. He's taking medication for his diabetes, and he's taking 2 medications for his blood pressure. What happened to him? He comes and we put them on a plant-based diet, exercise, help him overcome various addictions and so forth. In a matter of 18 days, he has lost 16 pounds, and we had to stop all medications. Not because we were mean, but because he no longer needed them. His blood pressure came down to normal levels, and so does his blood sugar. He continued doing the changes at home, and in a matter of 5 months, he had lost 83 pounds. He continues doing the changes. Now, at 10 months, he has lost 111 pounds. And by mid-year, in a year time, we do complete laboratories, blood pressure completely normal, cholesterol's perfect, so does the bad cholesterol, prostate exam also perfect, but the most surprising number there is the one that you see to the right and to the bottom, what is called the hemoglobin A1C, which is how good a diabetic has been under control the last 3 months. The number that you see there, a 5.5 on somebody that does not take medication, means he is actually no longer a diabetic. His diabetes actually has been reversed. He continues doing the changes. A few months later, he has lost 139 pounds. And you can see here, in a matter of a year and a half, the tremendous change that has happened on him. How was that possible? The answer starts with an N, neuroplasticity. As he started practicing new behaviors, those old behaviors started to disappear, new pathways started to be formed, and this became literally second nature. And this is from BBC News, saying that in England, 75% of the doctors don't know that diabetes can be reversed. And that's the thing. If they don't know it can be reversed, do you think they can help somebody to reverse their diabetes? That's the power of lifestyle medicine. And by the way, if you want to access those studies, there's actually more than 100 today. It's that link there that says ResearchGate. Now, you don't have to type the whole thing. If in your Google you just write 3 words, you will reach there. Just type the word Francisco, like San Francisco, Ramirez, ResearchGate. Those 3 words will take you there to that page on your Google. There's also a YouTube page there, and there is also a very active Twitter account sharing the latest on lifestyle medicine. But the interesting thing about this is that there is help for that neuroplasticity to take place. Many people say, but doctor, how am I going to change? I know I need to change, but how am I going to change? That's why we have actually neuroplastic texts that help us, encourage us, and give us that ability for those changes to happen. For example, Proverbs 23:7. For as he what? Thinketh in his heart, what happens? So is he. In other words, as the thinking is repeated, it makes roads, and those roads start to change the behavior. And that's something that we like to teach our patients by the name of cognitive behavioral therapy. Change the thinking and the actions will change. Or John 1:12, but as many as received them, to them gave him what? What it says there? Power to become. See, even in programs like Alcoholic Anonymous, you heard about that program? That's what it's based on. See, you start learning about those steps that you need to take in order for that overcoming to take place. And you come to the place in which you say, I need a power beyond me to help me stop drinking. And as this is not a perfect program and so forth, but yet it has helped countless of people overcome those habits by using this exact principle found on John 1:12. Or John 3:7. Marvel not that I say unto thee, ye must be what? Born again. The change is so big that is as if you were born again. The neural connections are going to be that different. That's why even the language changes. From being somebody that used to curse and so forth, now the language is clean and so forth. How can that happen? Neuroplasticity here. Or Romans 12:2. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. And if you go and look in the Greek, it is using the word metamorphos. What word sounds like that in the English language? Metamorphosis. And what is that? From a worm to what? To a butterfly. The change is so dramatical that that word encompasses that. By renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Or Philippians 2:5. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. How can that happen? Neuroplasticity, changing those patterns and those behaviors to new ones. Or 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And 1 Peter 1:23, being born again, not of corruptible seed, but of incorruptible, by the word of God, which liveth and abideth forever. And this is the reality. Let's get into the application of this. See, there was this interesting experiment in which they had these rats separated from one another, no ability to have social contact, in a dark place. And those rats socially separate them. They started giving them the choice between water and morphine. Those rats that were in that horrible situation started voluntarily choosing the morphine as a way to try to escape the horrible reality that they were involved with. But there was a second phase to the experiment. They put these rats in a place that simulated country living. Okay? They were able to do exercise and have friends and start families and have that social component. Once they put those rats that had the addiction in this new setting, they voluntarily started quitting the morphine and started choosing the water. See the importance of the surrounding that you have on the choices that you make? Now, some of you may be saying, well, doctor, but we are not rats. Well, there's some truth to that. You are not rats, but there's actually humans that have been experimented regarding this. See, there is a good amount of data regarding veterans from the Vietnam War. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of one of these soldiers. Here you are in a foreign country. Many times you didn't even want to go there. You were sent there. And you are in constant stress. You don't know when the enemy is going to come up and start shooting at you. You don't know if where you step in there's going to be a bomb there. The friends that you have made, you have seen that they have killed them in front of your own eyes. It is a horrible environment to be in. And see, many of those soldiers, they started getting into addictions such as heroin to try to escape the horrible reality they were in. But you know, now that they got back to America, where the stress levels were much less, and the environment was different, and there were girlfriends, and there were spouses, and there were loving parents waiting for them, it was found out that many of those people that were addicted voluntarily stopped using those drugs once we changed the environment that was around us. Or like this interesting study that was done in Canada. In Canada, as vast as it looks like, actually the major cities in Canada are located in the very bottom of Canada. Yet, if you go and look with a tool like Google Maps, you will see that there's actually little towns all over Canada. Who lives there? Anybody knows? The native Canadians, you know. Those people actually have changed and learned how to deal with that rough environment of those places. And for lots of years, they have lived there. Yet, there were some interesting studies that were showing that people living in those communities actually had between 500 and 800 times more suicides than the rest of Canada. This was such a shocking statistic that researchers were sent to those communities to try to understand what was happening that was causing such tremendous suicide numbers. So what they found out as they started investigating is that it was young people, the ones that were committing the suicides. And what they did, they went and interviewed young people in those areas. And they found out that as they asked them about their goals, about their futures, about what gave them passion and meaning in their life, those young people didn't have stories to tell. In fact, their answers were separated by a big space. Even the way they talk, they could see there were challenges. And you know, that started reflecting on the choices that they made. Their food consisted of junk food, and they would just spend their hours just watching TV because they didn't have anything else to do. And sadly, those were the communities that had tremendous amounts of suicides. Yet, encouraging, there were other native Canadian communities that did not have those numbers. In those communities, the young people had stories to tell. And it was a different environment. These young people were involved in their communities. And they had connections with the government. They felt that their voice could be counted and so forth. The elders were teaching the young people their traditions and their language. They were able to speak the tongue of their native people, and they were proud to be the people that they were. They knew where they came from, and they could see the important role that they could play in that society. So the choices that they made were different. As Johann Hart says, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is what? Connection. And that's the crisis that we have among us. See, the problem that we have is that there are many people that are socially disconnected. They don't have good social networks. Our society has changed very much. You know, in the old days, people at least used to go to a church or some social aspect in which they would interact with others. But today, as they are in cities, life is busy, no time for friends, no time for family. As globalization makes you move very easy, you have problems with those connections, and lacking those connections is not good for your mental health. Look at this study from the New York Times. Loneliness can be what? Deadly for elders. What's the antidote? Friends are the antidotes. Biggest threat facing middle-aged men is not smoking or obesity, is what? Loneliness. And you know, when you see statistics especially in the Western world, it is very sad. You have millions of people around you, yet no connection with those people around you. In fact, this is such a severe crisis in the UK that they actually put a minister of loneliness. I'm not making this up. Because this is such a severe public health crisis. In fact, in Australia, 82.5% of Australians report being lonely. That's how severe this problem is. And see, social isolation is a factor for disease. Like this thing they invented in Japan. I spent some time in Japan last summer. There's a problem there because people don't get married. Life is so busy, no time for friends and so forth. They invented this creepy hologram, and that thing is sending you, you connect that thing to your cell phone, and that thing is sending you messages throughout the day. Oh, I miss you very much. I wish you could come home so we could spend some time together. Come home to what, you know? To this creepy thing, you know? You don't need that, isn't it? You need a real friend, yes or no? That you can interact and talk and have a good time together. This newspaper, somebody who lacks social relationships has the same risk for early death as someone who is severely obese. See, connections, sociability is something good for our health. And we know that those connections can be increased. Like, for example, this few studies, and we'll be closing with this. People with low social support are higher risk for a heart attack. Or this other one. These people were going to have a heart procedure, and they ask them 2 simple questions. Are you socially isolated? Or do you have some close friend? As simple as that, such as a spouse and so forth. Those simple 2 questions. Those people that answer no, I don't have a good friend and I feel socially isolated, they follow those people. 5 years later, 50% of them had died. Compared to those that had good social support, only 17% had died. Small or big difference? Big difference. Or this other one, if you're socially isolated and there is anger inside of you, you actually are 3.5 more likely to have progression of your heart disease. Or this other one, those people that are socially isolated among males, they have 4 times more likely to die after they have their first heart attack. And that not only applies to males, it also applies to females. Same interesting numbers found among females, 3 times more likely to have those heart issues if they didn't have that support from their spouses. So I could show you study after study after study showing how social isolation is not good for you. So what's that social isolation that we're talking about? Is having that close attitude. Nobody can never ever hear this. That is too personal. Nobody should hear those things. So I hope this place can become a place in which people feel comfortable and are able to open up without feeling judged and so forth. That it has a healing effect when you belong to a group like that. So in intimacy, you feel safe, you feel free from criticism and judgment and manipulation. You feel that you can be understood and you're willing and able to share those feelings with others. So make sure that you have the following things in your life. One of them is having a purpose in life. Japanese call that the ikigai, or translated into the reason why you wake up in the morning. Okay. Ask that question. Why am I waking up this morning? Is there a purpose to it? Are you going to be able to serve others, make a change in your community, make an impact with those around you? Number 2, interaction between younger and older generations. As you interact like this, you're able to feel much better. And another factor, healthy social networks. Your friends, are they encouraging you to make positive changes, or are they helping make those bad habits worse? Be careful who your social network is. Hang around people that are encouraging you to do positive changes. And make sure you have that spiritual factor in your life. It is well known in studies that the people that live the longest have this factor as part of their lives. In fact, very interesting research. This is from the American Board of Family Medicine. They were comparing 2 things. What is better for your cholesterol? To go to church or to take the medication for statins that lowers cholesterol? Their conclusion, again, this is a secular journal, you're going to actually save more money by coming to a church than by paying for this medication regarding mortality, the probability of dying, and disease progression. This is a very interesting article. This is from the secular newspaper in England. Notice the title. I am an atheist who goes to church. Here is why you should too. You can Google those words. You'll find the article. And is this atheist tells the story how he was living in England. And if you ever go to England, there's all these beautiful churches all over the country. And he says he always would see these beautiful churches, and he would ask this question, what do people do there? And one day he decided to go. And he says he loved it. There was friendship there, and there was beautiful music, and inspiring message, and so forth. The guy says, I'm still an atheist, but I still go to church, you know. It's good for me, he said, you know. And he started bringing his child and so forth. You can read the article yourself if you Google those words. So, in closing, interesting study from Alameda County in California found out that those people that participated of those church activities had less stress about finances, they had better health, and they had less stress compared to those people that did not participate of these things. Or this one, Duke University, North Carolina, found out that those people that did spiritual activities on a regular basis actually had lower blood pressure compared to those that did not. Or this other one, those people that participated of those religious services on a regular basis actually had lower mortality rate. Their probability of dying actually decreased by that factor. And this other one, as measured by saliva, we can measure the level of immunity. It was found out that those people that participate of those spiritual activities, the immune system was working much better, which is fantastic. You want to have that. You know, your probability of cancer and many other diseases decrease when immunity is improved. And this other one, it was found out that those people that have the spiritual component have lower suicidal rates, less probability of abusing alcohol and drugs, and even at the level of the relationships, the marital relationships functioning much better. So, in closing, I want to share the following verse. It talks about David. David was a human being just like you and I. And it tells us the story how David started to become trouble. Anybody here has ever been trouble? We are humans, isn't it? And there is trouble around us. And he started complaining. You think that when you complain, it makes things better? Yes or no? No, it actually makes things worse. Because now you're troubled, you start troubling others. And the other one person, oh yeah, that's true, I should be troubled, you know. And it's like a virus, you know, you start infecting others. And he starts saying, I refuse to be comforted. I started questioning God. I was overwhelmed. I was alone. But notice what he does. He starts changing the focus from himself to others. And this is something I see even at the clinical practice. Patient that is socially isolated and is just thinking about themselves, what happens to them? They actually become worse. But by changing your focus, that can help you feel much better. So he started changing his focus, King David, and notice what happened. I started remembering your works, he says. I started remembering your wonders. I started to meditate on your works. I started to talk about the things that you are doing. You are a great God. I am no longer troubled. What happened to him? Change in those thought patterns helped change even the way he felt. So as you can see, there is hope because the brain can change. And even those habits that sometimes we struggle with, we are not alone. We can ask help and be overcome. Thank you very much. Yes, in the afternoon, I'm going to share with you some of the latest research that is coming up. We have inside of us clock genes. And when you violate those clock genes, you can severely disturb your health. So we're going to be learning about those clock genes and how to work better with our clock genes for a better health instead of going against them and affecting our health.
Thank you. So you are all invited for the fellowship lunch, and I heard very clearly, try to find the friends, communicate with them, try to find new people, and this is going to lower your blood pressure and everything else, tremendously help you. Thank you so much. Okay, let us all sing together hymn number 294, Would You Be Free from the Burden of Sin? 294.
Let's pray. Our Father, we're so grateful to have this brain that you have given us. We pray that you may help us make the right choices and help us overcome those things that need to be overcome in our lives so that we can have that neuroplasticity that you want us to experience. Thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen.